Thank you so much for joining us today on Rising Through. Today we have Maria Zapata. You guys are definitely going to want to get your notebooks out and give this gal a listen. She has an amazing story. I'm so thankful for you joining us today, Maria. Maria is actually also in the insurance business. We've been interviewing a lot of insurance people lately. I'm in insurance, and there's just so many inspiring stories within the insurance industry. But the lessons that we're going to talk about today can definitely be applied to any business. When I was running my automotive business, the same lessons were required to get to success as to get to success in the insurance industry. So whether you're running a restaurant, a gym, insurance business, or other, even if you're not running a business, what I have learned is that in order to propel ourselves to success, there is going to be bumps along the way. The struggle is where we learn. Growth usually does not come without something that pushes us to grow, something that usually is uncomfortable, dramatic, and even painful that makes us grow. As humans, we usually don't sign up for it otherwise. We get really comfortable, we stay the same, and we just never rise to the next level. And so we are excited to talk to you today, Maria. I love your story. But tell me, Maria, so we're in Canada, but I don't think you're from Canada. Is that correct?
That's correct. I was born in Guatemala and I immigrated in Canada back in 1983. I was 9 years old.
Wow, 9 years old, but you still have quite an accent. So did you
Yes.
guys speak Spanish primarily at home then?
All the time. We
All
were
the
not allowed to speak English.
Yes. It's important because
So
you
that's
lose
why.
that language so quickly. When you came to Canada, did you speak English at all?
No, no English at all. Pure Spanish.
Wow. So you
Yes.
just, what happened? Like you
Yes.
came to Canada and like, so walk me through this a little bit. You're 9 years old. You came to Canada. How
So
soon after that did you start school? And what did they do? They just dropped you off and they said, figure out how to talk.
back then, like in the 80s, Canada was very different.
Yes.
And we immigrated. So obviously from Vancouver, I started it here in grade three. And however, they used to have these classes, they used to call the ESL classes. So the immigrant children were not allowed to mingle with the regular grade threes. We were all like from grade three to grade six, all in the same ESL class, just strictly learning English. So, it was really challenging because most kids spoke my language. So we all speak Spanish.
Yeah. So
So
how do
it
you
was an
learn
ESL
then?
class. Exactly. So then, the teacher will say, speak only English, speak only English. And it
Yeah.
was very challenging. And then we were there. I probably stayed in that ESL class till grade five. And then in grade five, transitioned to normal class. And then that's how I started learning, through TV, through friends. That's how we learn. And of course at home it was very strict just to speak Spanish. And so it was I believe it was mainly from the TV that we just
Yeah.
speak the English language.
And it makes sense why you have hello.
Hi.
This is Maria's
We're
business
doing a
partner.
podcast.
She's like, get out, we're recording. So it makes sense why you still have such like you have an accent. I mean, a lot of kids come and like they're so focused on getting rid of the accent, which of course has pros and cons, retaining that language and culture is
Yes.
so important. And in Canada, we really believe in like a mosaic. We were taught instead of a melting pot. So a mosaic is like all the different pieces have their own individual beauty, and together they come together and make this beautiful picture and retaining that culture. But also in the 80s, of course, depending where you are, Canada did not have as much diversity depending where you
No.
were. And it was still very much like, keep trying to keep those parts hidden and fit in and all those kinds of things, which I'm
Yes.
sure still exist today if you come to Canada, but maybe a little bit different in the way of we're trying to celebrate and embrace more.
Mm.
We really, those languages that we learn are such a connection. And I'm actually a first generation Canadian. And I struggle even with, that connection of the in between. You're not local to your homeland, but you're not also local to the place that you're living. You have this like dichotomy between the
Yeah.
two. And so many first generation or new Canadians in that way, like the language is lost and then it's lost forever and it's such a loss. So what a blessing that you still have that language and that your parents were strict at home about speaking Spanish because it is important to retain that, right? It's like French
Yes.
immersion. That's the idea of French immersion classes is your like English speaking kids just show up and they've got to figure it out. My kids were all in French immersion, and then where I live, there was a huge wildfire and a bunch of stuff happened, and they were in school for a while because of it. And it was also so interesting because they could really speak French before the fire, and then now a few years later they really can't speak it at all, and it makes me sad that they lost that language. But you as a little girl, for sure that must have been difficult for you. But also being in the ESL class maybe somewhat isolated you for a little bit from that difficulty, do you think? Or what's your feelings on it now?
Well, my feelings of right now is it was accepting what it was back then, but I feel that it actually pushed us back in a lot of ways, learning what other kids were learning in the regular class, like, academic wise.
Right.
Because it
Makes
was so
sense.
focused on speak English, but what happens to the other things like the math, the science?
Yeah.
So when I actually hit grade seven, I really struggled because I wasn't in the same level academically of the other kids. And
Right.
they always blamed the language barrier, but it wasn't the language barrier. It wasn't that we
They
never
didn't do
had
the
the
fundamentals.
opportunity.
Yeah, so
Exactly.
interesting.
Yeah.
It's a good lesson. I mean, I think everyone does everything with good intentions, but then we don't know the result of
Mhm.
those things until afterwards, right? Even as parents, right? We're trying to make it better for our kids, but we don't know if we're just messing our kids
Yes.
up in a different way.
So true. So true, Colleen. Yeah. We're all doing our best, right?
Yeah, we want to do better than our parents did, but we're just messing them up differently. So, okay, so you
Yeah.
went to high school, and then where did you go next? Did you go to post-secondary? Did you go right into the workforce? What did that look like for you?
So then after high school, I actually went a little bit to the workforce and maybe for 6 months. And I actually was going to become an air traffic controller. And I got accepted and all that. I challenged the tests with NAV Canada. And then I found out that all the training at that time in the early 90s, it was done in Northwest Territories.
Oh,
That's where NAV
whoa.
Canada actually has their training school. Yeah. And then I was like, okay. And then my dad kind of was like, well, why don't you just go into tourism? And I was like, okay. And I was trying to figure it out. 19
Mm,
years old. And then, I kind of go, okay, I got into tourism and then, from there I started working in hotels and cruise ships and why not? But my real passion was to become a lawyer. That was my real passion, Colleen. Like I wanted to become a lawyer. And
wow.
going back, to all that education things, I had an actual a school counselor because I was in grade 11 and I still remember this if it was yesterday. And I went in and I said, what do I need to get into college so I can start courses after high school so I can work my way up to get into law school. And she told me, you're not there. You don't have the academic
Mm,
skills that you need to become a lawyer. So you better just forget that idea.
ugh,
And that's what I was told. And then from there, everything was like, okay, if they, it was somebody from authority saying that to me. And then I
right.
just decided to, hey, I'll do other stuff. And that's why I think I enjoy so much what I do
Right.
because right now, just because it has so much of that, what I wanted to advocate for people. And actually, I wanted to be a prosecutor. That was my whole thing. I
Oh,
wanted to be a
really?
prosecutor. But yeah, and the difference was my whole idea of a prosecution was I want to be a prosecutor, but I want to really investigate if they actually didn't do the crime and what was like going deeper. And that's why
Right.
it was like, but yeah, I went to school and you know, God had a different plans for me, I guess.
Right.
And
Do you do
but
you think that that you could have done it? Like, do you think that that lady's advice was correct?
I feel that if I would have had that encouragement, I would probably at this point would be a lawyer
Yeah, I think
because
so too.
I wanted it. Yeah. But because, at that time, it wasn't what we have now. That's why, I
Yeah.
see so much opportunity now that back then you had to rely on some counselor telling you. There wasn't a lot of those resources that we have now, right? And like that, that encouragement of saying, yes, you can do it, or that, mental kind of like, that motivation, right? It was what
Mhm.
it was. You go through this system because the school is a system. But if you didn't have the grade, if you didn't have the right height or the right, they will just bash you right there.
Yeah,
And then
it's
it's
so
like,
different now.
you know,
There's more tools, there's more ability
so
to know
different.
that there's way to learn, right? Like if you want to learn now to be a lawyer, let's say you could find lots of
Hmm.
different ways to get through the schooling. I think it is so true. I had a counselor say the same thing to
Yeah.
me in high school. She said, "Oh, you don't need to take the higher classes because you're not going to university anyways." But little to no, I actually skipped a ton in high school. I was going through a lot. I
Yeah, I
had a
bet.
very bumpy childhood, and I was, not in the right mental space in the way of like, I was drinking and partying, and I was not going to school a lot. But a lot of the reason I wasn't going to school as I look back is I am more like an ADHD and inattentive type person. And I found school so incredibly boring. I was like, why do we have to talk about this topic for like 7 weeks? Like, we can do this in a day. And so what I would do a lot is I would just show up for exam day and I would pass the exam with high enough grades, like 90s and above, so that I could pass the course. And no one in the school kind of put two and two together. They just said, "Oh, you aren't showing up. You're not going to university." And, I look
Hmm.
back sometimes and I think I really could have. I could have done any of those jobs. And what I've also learned as we grow up and we start in different roles that I've had through business or my political career, and once you get into those boardrooms, anyone that's listening, you get into these boardrooms with people with these high titles, with the prime minister, with the ambassador to Thailand, with the CEOs of these multi-million dollar oil companies, people that are making millions of dollars a year. And I sit across the table with them and you know, maybe debating them on a topic. And you realize, at least I have realized, these people are not any smarter than me. The level of mediocrity that exists in the world and the just the slight edge of commitment that it actually takes to win is actually really little. And so sometimes we look at people in business or in these big careers or in these big, positions and we think, wow, they're so amazing. They're so smart. They have it so ahead of me. I could never do that. And what I've really learned, and I would love to hear your perspective on this, but they are not anything special. They are not any better than any of me. And that's what I love about particularly insurance industry, which is where you eventually ended up is because there's so many 500,000 $1 million earners that you meet and they are not they're not like some sort of special magical person. Of course, maybe they're really good at dedication, they have discipline, they did the work. I've just learned, whether it's a lawyer that I'm dealing with, whether it's the Prime Minister of Canada that I've had, in debates or conversations with, whatever person I've met throughout my career, I'm like, wow, these people are just people, and you really can do anything that you put your mind to. Is that kind of been your experience throughout your career and the different roles that you took post high school and on your way to insurance? Or,
Yes, that has been my experience and my view when you see these people like what you said about, they have the high position, so they might be, an executive or a hotel manager, it doesn't matter. You see that there is really not, of course, they're special as a person,
Mhm.
but they don't have nothing that is different than what I have, right? That what I can offer, right? And like you said, it can be maybe they're better in discipline, maybe they're more abrupt, maybe they're like, okay, I'll tell you how it is, and then you like it or not, right? Maybe they're like that. But I noticed that, and I remember I heard Barack Obama saying this. He was talking about his reflection when he was actually in one of those G8 summits. And he said he started looking around the room and he saw presidents and he saw, politicians and all this. And he asked himself this question. He actually asked himself, he says, I can't believe it, some of these people who are running countries.
Yeah, right.
And like, and he said some of them are great, and some of them is like, how on earth did you got there? And
Exactly,
he
right?
says, like that stuck with me because he's right. Right?
He's
We
right.
might see someone being all successful and all that, but we don't know nothing about how is behind the closed doors.
Right.
And that's where I stopped looking at, oh my gosh, this person is so good, right? Because we don't know what also their journey is. We might see the success, but we don't know what journey they went through. We
That's so
don't
true.
know, like, we were in Mahad and Kisi's event,
Right.
and we see the success of Mahad that he
Right.
has had as an accountant. We'll use that because he's a CPA, a very successful accountant. I didn't realize he has a firm with 42 employees.
Right.
He said that, but when he said his story, he used to pick up garbage and eat from a garbage can in a camp before actually coming to Canada. And then you see the success, but he struggled. He could have give up, right? He could have easily used all the excuses we put in,
Right.
right? But he didn't. He used that to force him to be so successful before actually coming into the financial services industry. But
Exactly.
it's just, but yes, it's the determination and the heart we have inside that actually will push us. What is our why? It comes down to that, right? What motivates us, or even what inspires us to do what we're doing. I don't know about you, Colleen, but for me, what pushes me is always the third person. Like, it's not about me. Like, I always, like, for example, my husband, my sister. If I can retire my husband in the next 2 years, that pushes me. That is actually driving me to do that. And because, so I always want to give someone else, not for me, because I feel that, and it's not selfish. It's just that I thrive more if I can see somebody else succeed. I thrive more like that. So if I had, an opportunity to help you get where you want to get, forget about me. I'll put you first.
Right.
And I believe maybe that's something that pushes me. That's why we're here today. But yes, if I could help you get where you want to get, even if I don't benefit from it, I will do that. And
Yes.
that's how I
Why
always
do
have
you think,
think.
what
Yeah.
was your, is there like a defining moment or an experience that you went through that you think shaped you into that person? Or do you think this was just kind of always how you were?
I think what shaped me to be kind of that person was when I started in the hotel industry. I started as a front desk agent, as an entry level position. And I always saw managers being very catty. They didn't want to teach you their job because they were afraid that you're going to replace them, which is a which
Mm,
is a broken mentality. And I always saw that, and I experienced that in firsthand because you become good a job you're doing, and then they would be like, now they feel threatened. They felt threatened, and I remember I was working for Best Western, and unfortunately we had this kind of a manager, and I promised myself that if I ever would be in a position where I would manage or lead people, I will never be afraid of teaching them what I know so they can stay in my place. So that shaped me. And then when I actually started ranking up in the hotel industry of having, better positions, or or positions of power, we will say, in that industry. I will use my influence to influence my owners so we could actually lift someone up and promote them. And here in Edmonton, that's where my career really took off in the hotel industry. I will actually, before coming into the financial services industry, I would actually grab people at the front desk and get and say, okay, you guys need to train for my position. And they would be like, well, where are you going? And I said, I'm not going anywhere yet.
Right.
But rest assured, when I leave, you're the next one who's staying here. And you know, Colleen, that happened in three of hotels that I managed here in Edmonton. They stayed in my positions. I was not afraid. I'm not afraid of saying, if you want to take over, let me teach you who take over.
It's
Because
such an
that's the
abundance.
only way we grow.
Yes, I
Hmm.
think, what you said there, so many people are scared that if they teach you something that you're going to take their position. And there is some merit to that, especially in the traditional business industry. You're like teaching your competition how to take you out, right? And it's like this, like, I can only succeed by you not succeeding, right? Which is what gets people so frustrated. There's only so many promotions to go around, right? You're like looking at your executive, you're like, wow, it's going to be a long time before that guy dies and I get an opportunity, right? And it is kind of how it is in a lot of business opportunities. But at the same time, in the right companies and the right environment, it's like, the more that you grow, the more opportunity that is created so that like say the hotel industry, well, maybe if you're creating so much value within that hotel, then now they can open another hotel because they're like, we're making so much profit because our people are so happy and they're doing such a good job and we have the skills required, we have the people required for us to continue to do that. Where a lot of times in business, you might have a great business and you want to expand, but your constraint is having good people to expand with. And what I've learned in any business, my automotive business, other businesses, is that
Yes.
actually is a lot of times the hugest constraint. It's not getting clients or business or revenue or opportunity to grow. Actually, it's the people that you have to grow with. And that is the constraint in today's world so often is not enough people are being trained or taught or working on themselves so that you can say, hey, we're going to open a new hotel and I've got the management lined up because we've got these people that we can rise up in our business. And it's so much the same in
Exactly.
insurance. I love, at least in the right company,
Yes.
in the right right opportunity. And this is again where sometimes the underbelly of the insurance industry is that is not the case in a lot of companies, but in the right company, in the right comp model, in the right structure is it is built upon the only way that you, Maria, can move up or get a promotion or get more higher comp grid is you have to promote people within your business, right? And I think you're perfect for that
Hmm.
because you have such a
Exactly.
caring heart. When you were okay, so you were a manager in the hotel industry, or you're moving up, you're doing well. What the heck would inspire you to even transition into insurance and finance? And what the heck gave you the gumption to think like that you could even do that?
So So what happened was I had a life insurance policy and I was working at the Hampton Inn here in the west end of the city. And this gentleman actually, he came in and he started talking to me. We just started chatting. He was staying at the hotel and he actually said, hey, you have a life insurance. He asked me that. And I said, well, actually, I'm looking for somebody that can review my life insurance.
He was
And he
excited.
said, okay, I can make an appointment with you and your husband. Are you married and all this stuff? And I said, yes. Like he was excited.
Yeah.
And he actually came to our home. Okay,
Oh, those
there
close
we go.
the
Yeah. So then, he came to our house and I showed him I had a Sun Life policy. I'm not afraid of saying that because I was a client of them, right?
door.
So I had a Sun Life policy and they sold it to me as a life insurance product for my mortgage. So we just moved into this house in 2007 and we got this policy and they denied me Sun Life denied me, saying to me, they actually sent me a letter. I wish until this point I would have kept that letter.
Right.
They actually sent me a letter saying the reason you're getting your insurance decline is because you're too fat. That's what actually the letter
The
said.
word said that.
The letter said
Imagine.
that. And I remember calling the lady who helped us because it was the mortgage broker
I
who
would
helped us getting it through
die.
here. And then she couldn't believe it. So then this gentleman, so that was my first experience kind of with insurance companies. And I had my own policy when I was 20 years old. I got it on my own. And I was 250,000, but that was with a company that doesn't exist anymore. Sound Life bought it. It used to call Clarica.
Oh, yes.
The gentleman was awesome.
I
You
started
know,
my career
Clarica.
there, actually, funny enough.
Okay, that's funny. So
It
then,
is.
so then when the gentleman actually he checked my policy, our policy, Ricardo's policy. Yes, we thought if he dies or something, he was going to get paid 300, our mortgage was going to get paid 360,000.
Right.
But what it was actually in really fine print that we never saw it until Dennis, that's his name. The gentleman's name is Dennis. He said, I want you to, he took our policies, he brings this policy back, and he read this. And he highlights it in yellow. And it said, yes, the coverage was for 360,000. However, it would only pay up to 360,000, but it will give it to monthly payments for only 2 years.
Oh, it was just a
And I was
payment
like, okay, this doesn't
insurance.
make, it was a payment insurance. It
Ah,
wasn't life. So that's where, we were in the process of changing all that. And then his wife got really sick. So he kind of took time off. So we were left in the air again. The company that I came from, Primerica, they came along and they did a whole review and everything. And I never had insurance because I only had my previous insurance since I was 20 years old. It was a term, which was fine, but not enough if
it
I would
wouldn't
have died.
last even, yeah.
So yeah, and it would have not even last. I wouldn't have it now, right? And then so then he said, but prior to that, I was looking to get into the financial services industry. But at that time in 2013, when I joined or whatever, it was only full time. It was
Only
more
full
full
time,
time. So
yeah.
there were only two companies. It was only like Primerica and the World Financial Group that had the part-time opportunity. That was it.
Yes. And
And I
still
wasn't
lots are
able
like
to
that.
leave my
Mhm.
job. Exactly. And so then, I was like, okay, if you're going to teach me how this works, I'm going to go in. Right. And then, but prior to that, I actually was looking into sunlight because I said, wait a minute. Okay, whatever. But if I learn this, and this has a lot to do if I learn this, has a lot to do with law. That's what my thought came. I can probably understand more and then maybe help others that if I'm in this chaos, there's more with this chaos. So, I started in my licensing. I didn't start until 2014 to get my license and then learn from there. I had a full-time job at the hotel at that time. I worked for Sheraton and I was so determined to pass the LLQP. And then by that time, there was like a big book or whatever they gave me to read. But I actually studied. I studied day and night pretty much. And I passed my license within a month.
I love it. I love it. I want us to go
Yeah.
back to a couple things. First of
Yeah.
all, that policy that you
Hmm.
had that was sold to you as a mortgage life insurance, but you actually were it was only going to cover your payments. First of all, for people that are listening, like this is so common, is we are sold things, unfortunately, in the insurance industry a lot of times, and it's not what we think it is. And or we're told stuff in the meeting, but like, we don't really remember that stuff. And I've sat down and done reviews for so many people where I thought you were going to say it was an accidental death because I've had that happen. The person says to me, "Oh, we're covered for $1 million." And then I open up the policy and it's actually only if they accidentally die or different things like that. So having a policy review, even if you're like, "Oh, I have insurance," just because you have insurance doesn't mean you shouldn't keep reviewing it and have like a third party sometimes review it and just make sure like is there any hidden gaps? Is there any surprises? Is there any things that are coming up? Is it going to renew and jump crazy in price? I had a policy that I was paying $40 a month, and all of a sudden 800 and something dollars came out of my bank account. I was like, what is going on? And they said, oh, well, your policy renewed. And I was like, wow, I can't afford $800 a month. And they were like, great, we'll cancel it for next month. So I was still out the 800. And so having a policy review is so, so, so important. But, going through that process, exactly, it used to be that you had to be full time. When I first started my career, that's why I left the industry actually, is I actually started my career as a captive agent with Clarica, and then it became Sun Life. And when my husband and I were going to start our automotive business, they said, "Hey, you can't work with us anymore because you only can be full time and you can't be a shareholder in any other business." And I was like, "Well, we're starting a business, so see you later." But this mission sat with me because when I saw what life insurance does and how important it is, and how many families are so devastated because they don't have proper protection, I was like, if I can help people avoid that, the lack of money in our society is such a root cause of so many things. Now, don't make it wrong, money doesn't fix problems, but it gives you choices, right, Maria? And it's like, if
That's
I look
right.
at so many people that are fighting, marriage breakdown, I'm stressed about money, I can't sleep, I turn to alcohol, I turn to drugs, I turn to fighting with my husband, I turn to domestic violence, I turn to, abusing my children, or stealing, and all of these things that happen because of like not enough money. I'm like, if I could just help a little bit with that by helping people get proper protection for illness and death and all of these things, that is something that I really believe in. And then secondarily, I believe that starting part-time, sometimes there's this ongoing debate in the industry is, that we shouldn't have part-time agents and all of these things. And you know what, for me, when I came back into the industry after a wildfire, like completely put my family in a position because my town burned down. We couldn't re-enter for at least 6 months. And so we had this auto business where all of my income and security for my family to feed my kids was dependent on this business. And suddenly we couldn't earn revenue anymore, but our bills did not stop. I was like, what am I going to do? And so life insurance industry came back across my plate. That income that I was earning was security for my family. And the industry loses so many good people because the traditional industry is like, you can only do it full time. You can only be this type of person. You can only. So many good
Mhm.
people are missed out because of that. And so I love part time. Within that, nothing's ever perfect, but I love that you were able to start part time and transition into business ownership because no matter what kind of business it is, there's like a ramp up, there's a learning curve, there's a cost to
Yes.
get started. If I want to open a store, if I want to open a restaurant, my automotive business, it costs us a ton of money to get started. And not everyone has that opportunity. But we know that so many people are stuck in their jobs, or they're not making enough money, or they need something more flexible. But how the heck do they do that? They don't have $1 million to start a business. And so I love
Exactly.
that you were able to start part-time. When you started part-time, how long did it transition? How long did it take you to kind of transition into full-time?
It took me 1 full year to transition to full time. I was tired of the 60, 80 hour week or more. It was awful, the hotel industry, even though I loved it with a passion, but just the hours.
The hours are brutal.
And then I was like, okay, let's see what this brings me. And when I saw that I made part-time, $15,000 in the first year, it wasn't much, but for me it was lots because I
Right.
wanted it to switch. I said, you know what? Maybe I can do this full time. And I actually got another job right in December of 2015. And I told that hotel, it was a travel lodge. I said, I'm going to stay with you guys just 1 year because I'm going to transition to another career in 2016. And March of 2016, I left the hotel industry, and this has been my career ever since.
It must
And
have been scary though.
it
Yeah. Sorry, the
Yes,
internet. It
it
was
was.
probably
No,
scary. And
it
like, what
is.
did you go, what were you going through emotionally when you were thinking, okay, number one, I think I want to do this full time, but that means I have to quit my job and then I'm going to lose my security. Like, what was going through your head? What made you brave enough or like what actually got you over the hump to do it full time? Because I mean, a lot of people are like, well, I can't do that. That's crazy.
It was in my mind was like, oh my gosh, how am I going to pay the airport bill? And I had two young children back then. Still, Saley was 7, and Saori was like 13, and I was like, okay, I have always been a little bit of a higher income than my husband, and my husband said, you know what, that's okay. I'll deliver newspapers. So after
Wow.
his full-time trucking job, he will go in the middle of the night to deliver newspapers at that time, to the homes and the boxes. He did that. He did that, Colleen, he quit 1 year prior of me coming into Experior.
Wow.
Yes. And through that, I just kept fighting and fighting full time. Even though I love the company that I came from, I was working, I will say, my butt off in, day out. And I was like, why is it not happening?
Right.
And there was a lot of tears, but something inside of me, I couldn't quit. I was like, I'm too stubborn to quit because I love what I'm doing. I had my clients, my clients are everything to me, my team members. And I'm like, no, I'll just keep going and going. But when I quit and then, when I quit the hotel, I never regretted quitting the hotel. I never did because I knew that if I stay long enough, everything brings us struggles. Everything would, right? We hit rock bottom with our husband. I hit rock bottom with Ricardo to a point that I went back to Scotiabank and I said to them, I said, well, can I stop payments on my mortgage? And
Wow.
I can come like twice when I get the money to come and pay you. And thank God, the guy from Scotiabank, he was like, yeah, let's do these arrangements. And he did it for 3 months until we just kind of bounced back. But I was refusing to quit. I refused to quit. And my husband was like, no, keep going.
Wow. Okay. I mean, most people are listening to that and they're thinking you should have quit. Most people on the outside, if they heard your story, they just think this is crazy. And business owners, what I find is it's the same story no matter what the business a lot of times. We go in and we commit ourselves so fully and we're willing to risk everything. And in business ownership, a lot of times we're looking at the accolades, we're looking at the success, we're looking at the pinnacle of someone where they've achieved it all and they have the lifestyle and they have the income. And, you know, we often forget the risk of it and the real life risk that comes along with that. Like, this is real. You could have lost your home because you chose to
Mhm.
continue your business. And for some people, that is what happens. But within that, Maria, my goodness, like, what the heck were you thinking? What was going on? I know you said you're committed to your clients and all of this kind of stuff, but there's also the real life. Your kids are in front of you and they like I don't know, want to go for ice cream or they need new shoes or they all these kinds of things. And you're like, maybe I should just go back and get a job. Like, what about it besides loving your clients? There has to be something else that made you and your husband say, no, that failure is not an option. We are continuing this.
I For us was our power that we knew that it was temporary. We knew that it, we needed to do the sacrifice because if we would have give up, everything will be over, right? You give up, everything over. I go back to a miserable job that I didn't enjoy anymore.
Yes.
He will be stuck probably until this point in the trucking business. And this was way before the pandemic, right? Like that. But something told me, like, it was just, if we don't push through, I'm never gonna have the freedom.
Mm,
Maybe I'm not gonna be there for my kids, for their wedding. Maybe we're not gonna have enough money.
right.
If I stop now, we're gonna be in the same thing. So then
Mhm.
when 2020 2020 came, I am so happy I didn't quit my financial services business
Right.
because when 2020 came, the hotel industry crashed,
Yes.
restaurants crashed, everything crashed, and my business was still going. I was still, yes, I wasn't probably
Oh,
making
I have
the a
chills,
hundred
Maria.
thousands or the 50. My income was coming in like, 2,000. There were clients coming like, Maria, this is going on. I need I need insurance. I need this. So if I would have given up, we probably would have lost more. And I didn't. And then, now that I look back, and this is what my message is to people: be prepared with something. It doesn't matter. Like, if you have an opportunity coming your door right now, take it and see where it can take you. If you have opportunity to save $50 right now, $100, $200 now, save it, because you don't know when the drought is going to hit, right? When the abundance is there. And I never had abundance before 2020, but I was planting those seeds,
Right.
right? Even though it was hard, but it was planting those seeds. And then when 2020 hit, that's where I was like, I'm so grateful I never gave up, because my financial services business was soaring.
I'm
And
gonna
that's what it
cry.
kept me.
It was so
Yeah.
similar to my story in the way of when the wildfire came into our life. And, most people don't have something catastrophic like that, but I've learned that there's usually something coming, whether it's an illness, an injury, a job loss,
Yes.
something. But number one, we definitely could have done a better job of preparing. What I learned at that time is, our people that we were working with, our wealth advisors, all these people had never actually set our business up in the way that they could have to protect us financially. And there's a lot of things that could have been done, and it cost us literally millions of dollars. And so now I love
Mhm.
teaching other business owners. I love teaching anybody, but specifically, there's so many things that business owners need and should be doing, is not generally taught. But when I was
Yes.
facing that wildfire, and we had over $200,000 a month of recurring expenses and no revenue. And again, this is an extreme situation, but it's just as stressful if you just have a family income and you suddenly have no money for a mortgage and food and all those things. The stress is the same.
Yes.
The numbers just change.
Mhm.
But I sat to myself and I said, I will never be dependent on one location to earn income anymore. I did not know what I was going to do. I did not know what that was going to look like. But I said, I will never be in this position again where someone can lock me
Mhm.
out of my income, because what happened was the wildfire happened and then we were not allowed to return for many months. My house that I'm living in right now, we could not even step foot in the area for 6 months to start rebuilding.
Oh my
6 months before we even started rebuilding the house. It took us years to rebuild the house. We're coming up on 10 years later, and we have still not been paid out from that insurance company. And house insurance is a
gosh.
whole nother game. And I said, I will never be in this position again. I don't know what I need to do, but it's not this. And so throughout, there was a lot of different reasons. I wanted something different. I never wanted to be in automotive for the rest of my life. At the beginning, we didn't have kids, then we had kids. I was like, this isn't fitting my life. Along the way, my kids needed more time. I had all of these things going on. But that fire, it was like I wanted to change, but like I was comfortably uncomfortable, right? That fire made it to where I was like, I don't know what I need to do, but there is something that is going to put my family in a different position so I won't ever be locked out of my income again. And fast forward, what happened? There was the pandemic. And thank God I started my financial business, because I can literally do my business from anywhere. We weren't locked out. Everyone was locked out of their other businesses. I was not locked out of my financial services business. I knew I could make money for my family, whether it was on a laptop in a corner, where it doesn't matter. I can move forward. And what I've learned is, like you said, you have to prepare. People have to have options. Having one income these days is just not safe. if the federal government in the US can not pay people, I don't know where there is job security. And it might not be financial services. I don't know. Maybe it's pet walking or dog sitting or cleaning
Yeah.
houses, or I don't know what it is for you and your family, but I know that so many families, number one, are falling behind and their income is not catching up. And you can only save so much money a month, and then you have to find a way to make more. And I was just getting shivers when you were talking about it because it was like I knew that I had to do something different. I didn't know what it was, but I was being called to do something different. And I believe that God was calling you too to like fight through this. You didn't know why you couldn't quit, but you had to quit. And like you said, if you had quit, you would have lost everything anyways because you wouldn't have been able to earn income during the pandemic. And it's when you're in that moment of struggle, we don't know why, but sometimes you just have to continue because I look back and it was one of the most traumatic, horrible times in my life. For many years, it was really hard for us to rebuild. But I wouldn't trade the growth that came out of it. I would never
Yes.
trade the growth that came out of it. What were some of your biggest lessons besides like not quitting, or what in those dark moments? For me, it was podcasts that kept me going. I would listen to my podcast, I would hear other people's stories. I was like, if they could do it, I could do it. They were homeless and now they're successful. And it just gave me that hope. Was there something in your daily routine in those hard days that like made it possible for you to move forward?
Yes, Colleen. For me, it was my Bible. It was going to on my knees and just talking to God, but not in, I have ever, not in a prayers, that we say, please God help me. No, no, no. It was like, give me the strength to keep moving forward. Give me the wisdom to understand what I'm not understanding,
Yes.
and give me the guidance and show me the steps. Put your lamp on my feet so I can follow your steps. And the prayer of Jabez.
Mm.
I will pray the prayer of Jabez. He will increase my territory greatly.
Yeah.
I didn't know how would that look like. And I still, this point, I pray it. Increase my territory greatly. Give me the strength that I need today to keep moving forward. Give me the wisdom to help and to say the right things, even though I know I will fall back times. But you are my strength. So that was my strength. That was my strength. I read my Psalms 91. I read my Psalms 23. I will put the armor of God every day, and that was my hope. That
Yes.
was just to keep moving forward because that's all I had. And then of course I got into reading a lot of like books about leadership, my Christian books about perseverance, like David. I love the book of David. I read Max. What is this guy? There's this guy who writes really great books. I forgot his name, but
John
he
Maxwell?
actually has a
You said
book that
Max.
talks about your titans. Yeah, he
Um,
talks. Yes, yes, yes. And he wrote. I read this book about facing your giants, and it's all about the book of David. How our giants, we all have giants that we need to defeat, and but that kept me going.
yeah.
That's what kept me going today.
And that's what it's all about. I
Yeah,
think
to
I've really
have
come
to
to
hold on
believe
to
these
hope.
are all the things, right? The rising through is this idea that exactly that the point of life is to rise through, and it's not comfortable and it's not, warm and cozy, but that's not what life is about. Life
Exactly.
is actually about the struggle and figuring out a way to rise through it and
Mm,
using it for yourself, like as a gift to learn and grow. And so much of those same things when we are going through those struggles. And, life is always going to have ups and downs, but sometimes when you're in the pit of it, it is just so incredibly difficult. But I can tell you
yes.
if you're listening to this, you're probably you're the type of person that you're seeking to find hope and you're seeking to grow. And that's what I mean when I say I would have never done all of the personal growth that I have done if I did not go through those things, and I would not trade it. And I'm just so blessed and lucky. I'm so glad, Maria, that you ended up working with us and being a part of our company and our team. I know that you are someone that deeply cares about everyone again around you. And you're like, if this wasn't a business, you would do it for free. You're that type of person where you're like, I just want to help people. But what a blessing that you are able to find your place and find your income. I know that when you moved from your practice company, your income increased, all of these things happen. And for myself, the same thing. I feel like that was part of the required journey. Like if I had just started out in the environment that I am in now, I wouldn't appreciate where I am now in the same way.
Yes.
I don't know if you feel the same way or not.
Yes.
But yes, when you move
Yes, I
when you move
definitely do.
companies, tell me just quickly, and we'll wrap up because I think that that's we're at a beautiful place of exactly the point of what we do with this podcast is there is going to be struggle, there is going to be things that you encounter, but that will bring you to your success. You will not get to your success without going through those things. But just briefly, what was the catalyst? I couldn't talk there for a second. What was the catalyst for you to then make this big decision? Because it is a big decision to change companies. We develop relationships and we learn things and we become, really close to the people that we're working with in business. And to make that change probably also wasn't easy. What was the catalyst for you to do that?
So the catalyst for me to switch was because I saw the opportunity that was in front of me. I saw that I needed, I have learned and I have grown, and I will always be grateful with my previous company because they gave me that opportunity.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
it came to a point where I needed more. It came to a still over there. And I did my research. I went and researched everywhere. I talked to three different IMO MGAs when I was looking at Experior. But one of the things that really made me that aha moment, it was the humbleness of our CEO. That's what actually turned the whole thing for me,
Right.
because I saw that they truly, and I'm not saying this because I'm in the company. I'm saying it because I really true believe that they care. He care about me, the person, when he was talking to me. I really believed in that, and then I saw that the struggle that I went through, I was going to get rewarded. I had to still have to do the work here, but now what I have learned in my struggle, now coming here, it was the aha moment. And anywhere from the support, the 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 compensation structure, all that. But it wasn't the main moment was that, and I will say his name, Jamie Prickett, care about the person. And until this point, I feel it the same way. And I believe that even though I went through my struggle in moving, because one of those things is, and that's in any business. So you might think, okay, I'm going to make it here. Let's say you started a cleaning company. Yeah, I'm going to make it here, and you gave it all. It's hard, but then all of a sudden it didn't work out, and you had to transition to a different business. There's going to be a time of griefness that you're going to
Mhm.
grieve.
Yeah.
And I had to pass through that grieveness, but it's still at the same time I pushed through here. And yeah, I can never be more grateful. I've now seen the success that I have had far, and there's more to come. And it's just, I'm just grateful, Colleen. I'm so grateful
Me
for the
too.
organization. I'm so grateful for the people. Like, if I would have never made a switch, I would have been here, the opportunity of being here with you, with many other leaders, with other associates, with other, I don't know, it's really hard to explain it, because sometimes we hear this all the time. It's just noise, but it's just no. It's really coming from my, it's so if it's really rising up. It's really rising up. I had to go through that struggle to appreciate what I have now. I
I
had to,
I agree. I
because it's
agree.
like you say, if we would have started here, probably we wouldn't.
We wouldn't appreciate. And it's like at one point you had to stick with it, at another point you had to pivot. And the difference is, you're just listening to a higher power, you're listening to your heart, and you just got to do what you feel is right and just move forward with integrity. And that in itself is such a win. So I appreciate you
Yes.
so much for coming on today, Maria. I love your story. I
Thank
encourage
you,
everyone
Colleen.
to connect with her on social media. She is someone that you definitely want to have in your algorithm and in your world. Thank you so much, Maria, for spending time with us today. I'm really loving our conversation, and I love watching you rise up. And that is what Rising Through is all about. We are committed to becoming better and better. And we know that it's not just going to be easy, but it is going to be worth it. So thank you, everyone, for listening, and keep rising through.